separately when compared to this microscope, which is showing them as a blurred images. Sometimes even though your wavelength is 200 nanometers, you are supposed to get 0.1 micron as a resolution. You won't get 0.1 micron. The reason is that your lenses that you are using are not perfect. Each of these lenses have certain aberrations. Okay, the aberrations we usually know as what kind of aberrations that you are aware of? Are you know? Or do you know any aberrations in lenses? Chromatic aberration, spherical aberration. You have never heard of it? Huh? No. Optics. You have not gone through optics. So spherical aberration is that when you have a lens and you have an object from which the light is falling, this light, when it falls onto an optical path at a particular distance, depending on where it is coming from, it gets refracted into different positions. The one which is going from the center nearer to the central region gets focused onto a point which is farther. The ray that is refracted from farther from the center of the lens gets refracted to a shorter distance. As a result, though you are talking of one simple sample, one object, the object which is basically a spot kind of an object looks like a disc kind of an object for you, unless you have all these rays focused onto one particular point. Then a dot looks like a dot. If you want a dot to look as a dot, then you need to have all these focused at one point, and this is a problem with normal lenses. And as a result, people now use what are called twin lenses, which are concave convex mixtures people use, so that this correction can be taken care, and these are called corrected microscopes, which are called aberration corrected microscopes. Most of the optical microscopes, we can correct this spherical aberration reasonably well, and as a result you get one focusing at one point. But there is another correction which is required, what is called chromatic aberration. Chromatic comes from the word which comes from wavelengths. Okay, the incident beam may not have the same wavelength. The light which is falling on the object going through the lens may have different wavelengths. If it is coming from different wavelengths, all these from the same point, when they are getting refracted, different wavelength lights get refracted differently, right? The shorter wavelength gets diffracted differently, the longer wavelength gets diffracted differently. As a result, again when they are being focused, they are not getting focused at the same point. So though they are originating from the same point, they are not focused to the same point. As a result, you see that when I am using wavelength of different wavelengths, radiation of different wavelengths, they give me a blurred image rather than one single image. The best way to solve this problem is to use one single wavelength, what is called monochromatic wavelength, right? That is why filters are useful. Filters not only can help you to improve the resolution. Why? Because I am using a blue filter or something like that, which can have a smaller wavelength. As a result, lambda by 2 will be smaller. I get a better resolution. But also because it can focus all the rays up to one single point. As a result, chromatic aberration can be corrected. This kind of corrections are essential in optical microscopes, or for that matter any microscope. Just to give you an idea, a transmission electron microscope, which is also a microscope, which can give you a better resolution than what you can achieve here. In the next class we are going to talk about it. Is a microscope which costs you at least about 4 crores, which is called a TEM, transmission electron microscope. An optical microscope may cost you anywhere from 1 lakh to about 5 lakhs, depending on how good is that microscope. Okay, sometimes even 10 lakhs, depending on if you are buying it from Carl Zeiss or something like that, the best microscopes. So whereas from here, if you want to get a better resolution, why you get a better resolution in electron microscope, we will talk about it in the next class. You will see that you need to go for this. And in that microscope also there are lenses which are used to focus. Why do we use a lens? Lens is always needed to focus the beams to a particular point. Lenses are used for focusing. Otherwise, light will go parallelly. Parallel beams will go, and then you won't see any image if you don't have a lens. Even eye, we are able to see anything because my eye is a lens. If I don't have a lens in my eye, I cannot see anything. Everything will be blurred. So because the lens focuses it, and if the lens is perfect, it focuses properly. If it is not perfect, it does not focus properly. That's why people, if I remove, I cannot see anything. That's because my lens is not working properly. And if the lens is working properly, it focuses it well and shows you a sharp image rather than a blurred image. And this, if I have in an electron microscope, we have what are called aberration corrected electron microscopes. We just recently bought one in our IIT Madras. It costed us 15 crores. So one single microscope costing you that much is because where you can correct the aberrations caused by, to some extent, to the best. That's why we do not call them as aberration free microscopes. We only call them as aberration corrected microscopes because the correction cannot be perfect. So you can reduce the aberration. By reducing the aberration, you can have a better resolution. And in such a aberration corrected microscope, you can get a resolution of the order of 1 angstrom. That means 0.1 nanometer. The best resolution in these aberration corrected microscope also. In India, right now, including our microscope, we have 3 aberration corrected microscopes. One microscope is there in TIFR Bombay, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. There is another microscope which is in Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Research in Bangalore, and the third one is ours at IIT Madras. And the one in Jawaharlal Nehru Center is a microscope where both the chromatic aberration and spherical aberration both are corrected. Correcting a spherical aberration is easier. Correcting a chromatic aberration is a little more difficult. Okay, so the one that we have is the one where spherical aberration is corrected. The one which TIFR also has is only spherical aberration corrected. The one which is in Bangalore has both aberration corrected. It costed them 25 crores. So you can imagine the level of investment that one has to put in if you really want to. And there you get a 0.5 angstrom resolution. This is the best resolution anybody could achieve in a microscope so far. That you can actually see 0.5 resolution basically means that you can actually see atoms, how atoms are arranged. And we will talk about how to see those atoms as we go along. But even started microstructure, just to understand how microstructure influences whatever we have talked so far is that how microstructure influences. To understand how microstructure influences, we talked about how the grain size influences, how the dislocation density influences, and then we started looking at whether the microstructure, when we say microstructure, what we mean by the microstructure. If we are talking of a pure metal, what we mean by microstructure is just the grain size. Okay, whether the grain size is smaller or bigger is what we see in a microscope. If I give you a small piece of pure aluminum or pure iron, what you see is grains of aluminum and iron. And you can only say this is bigger or this is smaller. And if I go to slightly higher resolution microscope, which is what we talk about it as we go along, you will see even finer details inside that. Not only the grain size that you will see, you will also see possibly the dislocations. And what we talked about, dislocation densities, can be actually seen. I take a metal which is an annealed, let's say copper and a deformed copper, put both of them into a microscope. I should also be able to see that this deformed copper has more dislocations and this annealed copper has less dislocations. I should be able to see. But for that, what I require is something which has a resolution of the order of the sizes of the dislocations. If I ask you what is the size of a dislocation, what is a dislocation, by the way? Can somebody define dislocation? Can you define a dislocation? If I have a sample where one atom is missing, then is it called dislocation? What is dislocation? Plane of atoms. If a line of atoms is missing somewhere, okay, it's a row of vacancies, if you want to say it as. Vacancy is one atom missing. If a row of vacancies is there inside a material, then we call it as a dislocation. That's why we call it as a line defect. Right? So it's a line. So a line of atoms missing in the whole material. Suddenly you will see in one area there is one line of vacancies. One vacancy, another vacancy, another vacancy, the total certain length of line, there the atoms are missing. We call that as a dislocation. So this dislocation, if you want to see, the dimension of a vacancy is a dimension of an atom, right? What is a vacancy? One atom is missing is a vacancy, right? So if I want to see a dislocation, I should be able to go to a resolution of a microscope where I should be able to see atoms. If I can see an atom, I can see a vacancy. I can see a dislocation. So that is what brings us to what is called a microscopy. So far we talked about grains. We talked about, let's say, dislocations. We also talked about some materials which do not have only one phase but more than one phase. That's what we were talking so far about steel. I said a 0.4% carbon steel has ferrite and cementite, ferrite and pearlite. Or if I take aluminum copper alloy and look at the age hardened structure, or even not age hardened structure, you will have what is called alpha, which is called solid solution of copper in aluminum, and something else. What is the something else in an aluminum copper alloy? What do you see? Yeah, you precipitates. Precipitates of what? Alpha, precipitates of alpha, precipitates of carbides, Al2Cu. So Al2Cu is the phase that you see. Of course, when you talk about precipitation hardening, Al2Cu does not come out directly. It comes out in steps. All those GP Jones, theta double prime, theta prime, all those things are there. So these are all phases present inside a microstructure. Inside a matrix of alpha, these are all present. When they are all present, I would like to know what is the size of it, what is the shape of it, how many of those are present, what is the fraction of that second phase inside the matrix. Why I need to know? Because all these things influence the properties. For example, if I have aluminum copper alloy with 10% of Al2Cu inside alpha with 90% of alpha, another aluminum copper alloy with 20% of Al2Cu, the mechanical properties of this will be different from that, because the Al2Cu is a compound, right? Compounds are harder than solid solutions. So if I have Al2Cu, more amount of Al2Cu, Al2Cu being harder, I can say the alloy containing more amount of Al2Cu will be harder than the alloy containing less amount of Al2Cu. So amount of Al2Cu becomes important. Can I see this? How much of Al2Cu is there? Similarly, what is the size of it? If Al2Cu is present as big particles or small particles, same 20%. I can have two microstructures where small particles of Al2Cu, small particles, let's say spherical particles of Al2Cu like this, or some bigger particles of Al2Cu. If I calculate the area fraction of this and convert it into volume fraction, let us say, and convert it into weight fraction also, let us say that this weight fraction of this is equal to weight fraction of this, same amount. But this is also, let us say, 20%. This is also, let us say, 20%. But the 20% here is distributed as fine particles large in number, big coarse particles small in number. You will see that the mechanical properties of both of them are different. The left one will give you a higher strength when compared to the right one. So that means I need to know the sizes of these particles, shapes of the particles also. Why shape becomes important? If I have a particle like this, I have another microstructure where I have needle-like particles, again same volume fraction. Let's say 20% here, 20% there. If I now compare, the strength of these two may be same, but there are other parameters. For example, ductility, if I compare, the ductility will be different, the toughness will be different. Incidentally, you will see that this alloy will have higher ductility than this alloy. Same phase, second phase, this is also, let us say, Al2Cu, this is also Al2Cu. The matrix is aluminum, the matrix is aluminum here. But here just it is elongated, randomly arranged acicular particles, needle-like particles. Whereas this is spherical particles. The spherical particles will have higher ductility. Why? Anybody knows? The strength may be same actually, but the ductility will be more here. More ductile, less ductile. And you may be surprised if I say this is less tough, more tough. Again, I am deviating you from actual microstructure, but we need to appreciate all this. Why I should put a sample under a microscope should be clear to me. Why I should put a sample under the microscope is because of this. Because all these things will influence the property. So I need to know how much of second phase is there, what is the shape of it, what is the size of it. All these should be understood so that I can understand the properties. By looking at the microstructure, I should be able to tell the properties. And people are now going to the level of what is called computing the properties by looking at the microstructure. They don't even measure the property. They don't take a piece of it and measure the toughness of it or measure the strength of it. They simply look at the microstructure and do programming where by just calculating the fraction of the second phase, by knowing the size of the second phase and by knowing the shape of the second phase, can I predict the property without even doing a destructive testing? Because most of our testings are all destructive testing. I take a tensile sample, pull it, it breaks, right? I do not want to do all this testing. For that, I need to have a tensile testing machine. I need to have an impact testing machine. All these are required. If I don't want to have all these, can I do it? People are now doing this, is what is called materials modeling. But of course, for all this, you need to have a lot of data of how the microstructure influences the properties. And people have all this data nowadays available, and they are using all these databases. And from those databases, they are saying that if this is the size, and this is the shape, and this is the volume fraction, can I predict the property? And I do an experiment too, if you want to confirm that property, and people say yes, more or less you come very close to that, and people are able to do that. The reason for this is this: ductility depends on, to a large extent, on how a crack can initiate. Okay, ductility is always related to crack initiation to a large. Materials where cracks can easily initiate are the ones which have very low ductility, and in this kind of materials, wherever you have acicular structures, we have what is called stress concentration. Have you heard of that? Okay, triaxial state of stress, people talk about it. So whenever it's simple as why is that a nail has a sharp edge? If I have a nail like this, why cannot I turn it this way and put it into the wall? Why do I turn it like this and put it into the wall? For the same load that I am applying with a hammer, if I have a sharp edge, the stress is more, right? Stress is nothing but by load by cross-sectional area, right? So if the cross-sectional area is small, then the stress is more. So if that stress is higher than the compressive strength of that wall, then only the nail will go inside. Otherwise, nail will not go. And the moment this tip gets blunted, what does it mean? The cross-section has increased. If the cross-section has increased, the stress goes down. And once the stress goes down, it will not go. That is the reason why a nail should maintain its sharpness. If it gets blunt, that is where I actually choose a material. I do not choose aluminum as a nail. I use steel as a nail because aluminum is ductile and it immediately gets blunt the moment I hit it with a hammer. And once it gets blunt, it will not go pierce into the wall. So that is the reason why if a crack can get easily initiated into this, the material will have less ductility. But if I talk about toughness, toughness is a property which is, how do I measure toughness? It is area under the stress strain diagram. That means the total energy absorbed before a material fractures. This energy that is absorbed is related to how easily a crack can propagate. Okay? Brittle materials are those where the crack propagates very easily. For example, if you have ever seen a man breaking a glass, have you ever gone to a fellow who frames your photographs? If you have gone any time, you will see he will just take a glass and puts a scratch on it with a diamond, just draws a line and then just bends like this. The glass breaks. So the moment you initiate a crack, the crack can easily propagate. The moment you apply some load, the moment I apply a small load, immediately crack can propagate inside a brittle material. Whereas ductile material is one where the crack gets blunt as it progresses, and that is the reason why crack cannot progress. So whereas if you have a material like this, in this kind of a material, the moment you have a crack initiated, there are no obstacles for the crack to progress much. Whereas if you have this kind of a material, the moment if you have a number of, if I put instead of just 3 or 4 pieces like this, if I put a large number of randomly oriented things like this, so if a crack initiates somewhere here, it propagates and the moment it comes across a particle, it just gets deviated. And if there is another particle somewhere here, okay, it again goes and gets deviated further. So the more the number of randomly oriented acicular particles, you will see this crack gets diverted at a number of stages. And as a result, the resistance offered for the crack propagation is more. And as a result, you will see this kind of material absorbs more energy as it starts propagating. That is why bainite is more tough than even perlite. That's why people want bainite. The reason why people like bainite is that the strength wise bainite and perlite may have similar strength, but the toughness wise bainite is much tougher than bainite because of the acicular structure of the ferrite inside that. The cracks get diverted very easily, and as a result you will see. So whereas here the moment crack is initiated, the circular spherical particles do not offer anything, it simply goes. And here the crack nucleation is more difficult because there is no sharp edges. So because there are no sharp edges, there is no triaxial state of stress, there is no stress concentration, so crack nucleation is difficult. So you can see that simple thing such as strength, ductility, toughness, they are all correlated to shape of the particles, size of the particles, volume fraction of the particle. So just in a microstructure of a matrix and a particle, you can see how the properties can be influenced by this. So all this need to be known only by knowing the microscope. And to know this, you need to have some microscope. And why do I need to have a microscope? Because my eye cannot see everything. That's the problem. Our eye, a normal eye, those who do not have specs, okay, whose eyes we assume to be normal, have a certain resolution. What is the resolution of a normal eye? 0.1, let's say, millimeter. Am I right? That's it? Nothing else? Yes. Who is that fellow? Okay. You need to specify the distance. It is not 0.1. If I stand on the terrace of this building and see 2 dots on some building which is under ladies hostel, okay, from here, I cannot see 0.11 millimeter. No, not possible. However good eye you have, it is not possible. So that's why you have to define a distance. That's the reason why when you go to a doctor, he will give you a piece of paper with something written there and then ask you to put a distance of 1 foot and then ask you to see. So resolution is always defined in terms of a certain distance, that is 1 foot. Okay, 30 centimeters is what is the distance. That is the reason why in an optical microscope, the distance between the sample and your eyepiece is always 30 centimeters. Always maintain that. So from that distance, I can see 0.1, then I would say that is the resolution of my eye. So that means if there are 2 dots separated by 0.1 millimeter, if this distance is 0.1 millimeter, then a normal eye can see from a distance of 1 foot. But most of the features inside the samples are smaller than this. For example, if I am talking about precipitates inside aluminum copper alloy, precipitates are much finer. What is 0.1 millimeter is about 100 microns, right? So if it is 100 microns, then 100 microns is too big. My precipitates are even few nanometers. And now with all this nanotechnology that people are all talking about, if I want to see a carbon nanotube has a diameter of the order of around 4 to 6 nanometers with a length of a few microns could be, but the diameter is of that order and I want to see them, let us say. So that means definitely my eye cannot see it. So I need to go to something which is better than my eye, and that is where we use lenses. For example, sometimes you can use a magnifying lens and see smaller details. The reason is a lens can magnify a thing and then show a higher resolution. The reason is that when you use a light, okay, the resolution of a lens is usually defined in terms of what is called lambda by 2Na. Have you come across this statement anywhere? Any microscope, this is what is the formula that we use, where it is lambda by 2Na, which is the resolution, where Na is the numerical aperture. Numerical aperture can be written as nu into sin theta, where theta is the angle of collection of rays, and the nu is the refractive index. So In a microscope, if I take a microscope, an optical microscope for that matter, I take, let's say, a mirror which can reflect a light which will fall onto my sample. Let's say a metallurgical microscope, which is like an inverted microscope, all of you must have seen, or a normal standard microscope where I have a sample kept and then a light is falling on that. This light is reflected back. When it is being reflected back, you have an objective here through which it is reflected back and it goes into an eyepiece, and you see here the actual image of the sample. This is, let's say, our objective. This is the basic principle of the whole optical microscope, where the light falls. Of course, there are different types of it. When you can make small adjustments here to get what is called a dark field image or a bright field image. But basic principle is the light falls through this and then goes back. In case of a dark field image, the light does not go through the objective. Have you heard of an annular dark field image anytime? Okay, maybe we'll come to it a little later. At the moment, you assume that the light is going through the objective and then being reflected back from the surface and then goes to the eyepiece. Now, if I am trying to see the resolution of this microscope, the resolution of the microscope is related to the numerical aperture of the lens that I am using here, which is related to the light gathering capacity of this, where this angle, half of the solid angle is the theta, and then the what is called the refractive index. Refractive index of the light is of the air is usually considered to be 1, and so as a result, my resolution is if I take the maximum value of sin theta is what? 1. So if I take the maximum value of sin theta as 1 and the refractive index of air as 1, then this turns out to be lambda by 2. That's it, right? So lambda by 2 is the resolution of my optical microscope, and that's where you will see the limitation again, because lambda for an optical light, the normal light that we see is composed of various wavelengths. It's not just one single wavelength, right? So it goes from violet to red, and violet to red, the wavelengths change from approximately 200 nanometers to about 700 nanometers, right? So as a result, if I take off lambda, what lambda it should talk? I do not know what lambda it should talk. So we usually take it as an average lambda. The average lambda, if I take it as, let's say, approximately around 400 nanometers, that divided by 2 gives me 200 nanometers as a resolution. That means it is 0.2 microns. This is the resolution of an optical microscope. You cannot get better. You can get slightly better than this, when you do what is called filtering. Okay, what do we mean by filtering? Filtering means when a light is going through this sample, here I put a filter. A filter, why? To give you a single wavelength of a lower lambda as far as possible. I will not put a red filter there. I will put either a blue filter or a green filter, which is as low a lambda as possible, because in the WIBGR spectrum, violet to red, red is the highest wavelength, violet is the lowest wavelength. So if I can put a blue filter, only the blue radiation is coming, and the blue radiation will have a lower wavelength. So if I can reduce that wavelength, then that divided by 2 will be my resolution. So I can get slightly lower value than this with that. So, and that makes me get a certain material, certain resolving power, which is defined as this value. And many of our microstructural features are even smaller than that. For example, just now I mentioned about carbon nanotubes with a diameter of the order of around, let's say, 5 nanometers or so. I will not be able to see it there. So that means optical microscope cannot be used for everything. But if I want to see my perlite, I can happily see, because the lamellae, alternate lamellae that I am talking about, are of the order of few fractions of a micron. Either a micron or just a little lower than a micron. So I will be able to see these lamellae without much difficulty. And that's why we use an optical microscope to see most of the features. Or, for example, for a biological purpose, I want to see blood cells, red blood cells or white blood cells, for example. I will be able to see, because most of the blood cells are a few microns in size. White blood cells are generally about 1 to 10 microns in size. So as a result, I can easily see the blood cells very easily by doing that. But I cannot see blood cells with my naked eye, because my naked eye has only this much, 100 microns. Anything less than 100 microns I cannot. Blood cell is about 10 or lower than 10 microns. So I cannot see a blood cell with my naked eye. I need a microscope for that. The reason why microscope is able to show you finer things is because of this formula, that it is lambda which decides that. The lower the lambda, the better for me. So if I can go to lower lambda, I can see this. But light, this is the lowest. I cannot go below that. The lowest is violet. So I cannot go below the violet, because there are no radiations that are easily available for me in optical radiation, which is lower than light. As a result, I have to use a ultraviolet light. Okay, it is not easy to catch an ultraviolet light and then use it in an optical microscope to be able to see it. And that is the reason why the light microscopes have a limitation,